Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, Kingdom Warriors. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the Breaking Out of the Matrix broadcast. We've got a very special program for you today with a very special guest. Our date is September 11th, 2013. Very epic day as we are reminded of the tragic events of 12 years ago on 9/11, and our hearts and prayers go out in memory, of course, of the many lives that were lost and the devastation that took place that set the stage and set a precipice for much of what is going on today, and we're going to discuss a little bit about that. We have a really precious man on with us today, Dr. Chuck Baldwin, and we're really excited to have him. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Great to be with you, Caleb. Thank you very much.
Dr. Baldwin is an author, speaker. He is a pastor of Liberty Fellowship in Kalispell, Montana. He's authored some really great books. You did the Chuck Baldwin Live syndicated radio for about 8 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And a recent book that Chuck authored along with his son Timothy Baldwin is called Romans 13, The True Meaning of Submission. And this book, how do I say, just knocked it out of the park, because talk about a scripture that's gotten so lifted out of context by so many pastors and ministers over the year. Chuck and his son just nailed this from a historical standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, on what God was truly talking about in submission to God, submission to government and laws of the land. And I just really want to commend Dr. Baldwin. We really appreciate all that you do, all that you have done. Mr. Baldwin was also a vice presidential candidate for the Constitution Party in 2004, and then the presidential candidate in 2008 for the Constitution Party. So this man knows his stuff. He is a fellow warrior and a soldier of the faith, and he's been in the battle for a long time. So especially believers that are listening in, and again, if you're just joining us right now, you're tuned into the Breaking Out of the Matrix broadcast on September 11th here. Get a hold of this book. You can find this book at Chuck's website, chuckbaldwinlive.com, and you can also subscribe to his mailing list there as well, which I would highly encourage and recommend. So, in light of this kind of 12-year anniversary, Dr. Baldwin, there's so much that we've heard and seen in the past 12 years. And to get an understanding of what really went on behind the scenes, I want to encourage you. There's a great documentary called Press for Truth. Watch 9/11 Press for Truth. You can find that on YouTube, Google. It's a small group of widows who banded together seeking answers from the Bush administration for what really went on that tragic date. And, in light of such a horrific event, Pastor Baldwin, it's really set the stage for so much of what we're seeing at present with the surveillance, police state looming on the horizon, with everything that's happening with the NSA and the Snowden leaks, and especially the Patriot Act that was passed following that tragic event. So, Dr. Baldwin, would you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts and your mind of what has happened in these past 12 years since that tragic event?
Sure, yeah. You're right. The last 12 years have seen the biggest plunge into a burgeoning police state in the history of the United States. Regardless of the circumstances leading up to 9/11, and like you and so many others, I do not believe the official story. But whatever the circumstances were, the result is not deniable. We have plunged ourselves into a burgeoning police state at warp speed drive. 9/11 is the excuse that is given for every big government abridgment of liberty that's taken place over the last 12 years. It was the justification for the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. It was the justification for passing the Patriot Act. You just alluded to that. The Military Commissions Act, the NDAA. 9/11 justifies the Department of Homeland Security, TSA, U.S. NORTHCOM. It's the excuse given for launching deadly drone attacks against people in Pakistan, Yemen, Libya, countries with whom we're not at war. Now it's going to be the excuse for a brand new military action, it appears, against Syria. It goes on and on. Because of 9/11, police can break down the door of our houses without a warrant. Because of 9/11, they can set up checkpoints on America's highway. You and I can be indefinitely incarcerated without being told why, without having a legal counsel, all because of 9/11. You and I can be sent off to prison, even to foreign prisons, without benefit of a trial because of 9/11. We can be assassinated by our own government without being charged with a crime because of 9/11. Entire cities like Boston can be thrust into martial law because of 9/11. All of our electronic correspondence, phone calls, financial activity can be monitored by the feds because of 9/11. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. 9/11 is the excuse or the justification that is given for every abridgment of liberty that is currently taking place.
My goodness, it is absolutely disturbing how rapidly things have accelerated in these past 12 years, and you're exactly right with what you're saying, Dr. Baldwin. And again, to our listeners, you have got to get out there and seek the truth out for yourself. If you are still buying into what mainstream media is presenting to you and what they're spoon-feeding you with all their misinformation propaganda, then you are not really ready or prepared for what is coming. And that's something that you've got to do with this rise of technological advancements and the Internet and having so much access to information. You can get out there and take the time to find out the truth for yourself. And Dr. Baldwin and I are not going to go into what we truly believe happened and what was behind the scenes on that horrific day. But this is why we provide you with this information. MatrixBreakout.com was created to do that. Dr. Baldwin talks a lot about this kind of stuff. He has some wonderful sermons and newsletters on his website at chuckbaldwinlive.com. You just need to search this stuff out for yourself. Dr. Baldwin, in light of what you just said about Syria, I was a little bit disturbed last night, to say it lightly, by the presidential address. And what caught me the most was his statement, we know that the Assad regime was responsible for the attack. Now, you have a whole international community, especially Russia and President Putin, saying, we don't see enough evidence to allege towards this. And you have the president coming out and saying, that this is concrete, and this is why I'm trying to justify a war in Syria. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the administrations, and how you say plural, of this country, going back at least to the days of George H.W. Bush and escalating through the administrations of G.W. Bush and now Barack Obama, have proven themselves over and over and over again to be absolutely categorically untruthful, not only with the international community, but with the people of the United States. It's almost to the point where that we as the American citizenry should refuse to take anything that a federal government spokesman says to us at face value. And I think that that's the message that we are sending to the world, that we are totally untruthful. And I think the other message is that we are a bully, that America sees itself as above the law, and because we are the, quote, only superpower, we can do whatever we want by force, and nobody can do anything about it. And that is, whether true or not, that is the reputation that we are viewed by among the peoples of the world.
Well, we've all heard the statement, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall, and that's exactly what I sensed in watching that presidential address. And you're exactly right, Dr. Baldwin. There's a haughtiness and an arrogancy that is putting, I believe, the entire government as well as the nation in a very dangerous place. We can kind of see the little mind games that have been going on since Mr. Kerry kind of put his foot in his mouth and said, well, you give up your chemical weapons and we'll cease and desist this attack or whatever. And now that you see the Russian government giving them this ultimatum, while at the same time they are continuing to supply them with weapons for this war and different things like that. What direction do you feel this is going to take, Dr. Baldwin, over the next few days and weeks?
Well, I don't pretend to be a prophet, and I think this thing could go several ways. Even if it does go the way of a military attack, I am not one who shares the opinion that this is going to be something that's going to precipitate World War III. I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think it could have definitely some regional implications. I think what's happening, though, is these globalists who hate America recognize that this is a long-term commitment to bring down the United States. And one of the ways it does this is by this perpetual war syndrome that we are now in. It not only does it zap the resources of the United States. I mean, think about it. How many trillions of dollars have we spent since we invaded Iraq? Enough money to fund Social Security for the foreseeable future, and even beyond that. To do the things domestically that should be done, but all of that, of course, is squandered in war. So not only does it take away economic resources, financial resources, while, by the way, caveat, I should say, making huge profits for the military-industrial complex and the politicians that support it. We've got to bring that out. But what it does to the country beyond that is it continues to alienate the United States from the other nations of the world. One time the United States was the envy of the world. Everybody wanted to come here. They wanted to model, their economic societies after the example of the United States. Today, we are the most despised nation in the world. As I said a moment ago, the world sees us as a bully, and they despise us. And the only reason they tolerate us is because we give them so much money. But in their hearts, they despise us. And every time we take one of these little Middle Eastern states like Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq or Pakistan or whatever, and we begin launching attacks and killing people, most of them innocent people, by the way, the nations of the world tend to drift toward the Sino-Russia axis that's been created. And it builds their credibility in the court of public opinion around the world. Eventually, this is what I believe, eventually Russia and China will be militarily strong enough and will have enough favor among the nations of the world that they will launch a nuclear war against the United States. They will not do that until they feel that they can win that war. And how long will that take? Will that be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Nobody knows. But I truly believe that is the goal. And I do not think that Russia or China are right now prepared to risk World War III because they're not in a position to be able to prevail in a global exchange of ICBMs. One day they will be. And, of course, we are facilitating this ourselves, not only by the way that we are monstrously alienating people around the world and driving them to Russia and China, but also we are financially underwriting China and Russia militarily. And, so we are literally building the rope that's going to be used to hang us, and the old proverbial cliche. So I think that's where it's headed, and I think it's intentional. I think that the globalists who desire a global economy, a global market in which they can control the exchange of commercial activity free of nationalistic boundaries and encumbrances and so forth. They know that they've got to get rid of the United States to do that. But again, I don't think they're ready to do it. I don't think they have the ability to do it right now. So I don't expect, even if missiles are launched and there's a strike against Syria, I don't think that right now that is going to lead us into World War III. But I do believe it's going to be another step in that direction.
Agreed. And those are some excellent points there, Dr. Baldwin. And for the average American, sadly, who doesn't really understand what goes on and the intents and purposes and overall agenda for creating wars, I know for me, in my journey of breaking out of the Matrix, reading The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin back in 2006 was absolutely mind-blowing to understand how the Federal Reserve operated, the international banking cartel, and how these governments and elite global powers of the world love to create wars. So that baloney, if you will, in the presidential address last night about not wanting to go to war, I don't buy any of it. Because you and I know, Dr. Baldwin, that wars generate a lot of money. They generate a lot of debt, which is where the liquid money comes from, and where the power plays are made. I found it interesting, your recent newsletter here, when it comes to war, elephants and donkeys think alike. I was just going to read a quote from this. It says, there are two issues Democrats, Republicans, and Washington will always come together on: going to war on foreign soil and building a police state on the American homeland. Why? Because both of these actions dramatically increase the power and riches of the Washington establishment. Nothing turns a profit like war, and nothing gives more power to Washington like a police state. Whatever the differences might be, most everyone in D.C. wants increased money and power. Have the American people learned nothing from all these senseless wars of aggression? What is it going to take? Will it take a nuclear war before the people of the U.S. wake up and realize that we cannot act like a modern-day Roman Empire and expect to survive for long? And that's exactly what you were just saying, Dr. Baldwin, and it's a great way to sum it up. Is it going to take that level of tragedy, to bring people to the realization that we can't keep running around with this ego that says, we are in control and we are in power and you will bow to us? It's a dangerous place to be in. As we think about these things, again, and if you're just tuning into the program, we're live here with Dr. Chuck Baldwin, a wonderful man who's out there on the front lines of politics and economics and awareness. Let's shift just a little bit since our time's so limited here, Dr. Baldwin. In 2010, you recently moved your family from Florida up to Montana. Could you give us kind of a brief backdrop on why you made that transition and what your thoughts were behind making that move?
Okay. Oh, wow. That was about a 3-year process. That was a very deliberative decision. That was not something that was made lightly or quickly. The short answer, you already mentioned my website, chuckbaldwinlive.com, all one word. There's a page on the website with a link to a series of columns and articles relative to our move. It's called the Baldwin's Move to Montana. There's a little button that you can click, and it'll open up a series of articles and columns. And in that, I go into quite a bit of detail to try and explain to people why we did what we did. We just felt like that, after 35 years there in the Florida Panhandle, that our work there had come to an end, and we knew that God wanted us somewhere else. We just didn't know where at that point. So we set on a journey to find the place that God wanted us. And at that point, I was doing a lot of flying. Well, I still do, but in 2008 and 2009, I was in the air all the time. You know, I'm up to around 250,000 miles in the air now, and a lot of that was done in 2008 and 2009. And I traveled all over the country. I saw just about every state but four. You know, big cities, small villages, north, south, east, west. I mean, so it gave me a unique perspective. And when I traveled up here and spoke like 3 or 4 times before we actually moved, I felt something here and I saw something here that I didn't feel or see anywhere else. And then, of course, we came up for an exploratory visit, and some pretty incredible things happened. And anyway, long story short is we just really felt convinced that we needed to come to this Rocky Mountain region of Montana. We settled in the Flathead Valley. Kalispell is the principal city, which is about 75 miles south of the Canadian border, and right in the Rocky Mountains. And I got to tell you, it's, as far as aesthetics go, it's just the most beautiful place I've ever lived. The people here are marvelous, and don't regret the move one bit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I can imagine that some of it had to do with the direction that things are going in, and potentially a geographical safety factor with martial law, police state looming on the horizon. I'm reminded of a wonderful book that Joel Skousen put out called Strategic Relocation. I think it's important that we as Americans and we as believers be thinking strategically about where God wants us to be geographically. I believe that's going to become important in the near future. Because of time constraints here, we can't talk about the fusion and FEMA camps and things like that have been set up all over the country in light of a potential chaotic event or martial law or anything like that. So how much of the move for you, Dr. Baldwin, were you thinking in geographical terms of safety as well when you made this transition?
Oh, yeah, we considered everything. Absolutely. We looked at every conceivable factor, and what you just described was definitely one of those factors. It wasn't the only one, but it was definitely one of them. And, we feel that, this area of the Rocky Mountains, so I would include Wyoming and Idaho and Montana, maybe even parts of northern Colorado and eastern Washington State. Some people call this the Redoubt. There's a lot of people that are moving here, I can tell you that. Since we've moved here, we've probably had 30 or 40 families that have moved here from out of state just to be with Liberty Fellowship. And that doesn't include the scores of families that I know about that have moved here that are not connected in any way to Liberty Fellowship. So, there are a lot of people that are feeling the pull inside to come to a place like this. There's no question about that. But there were several other factors that went into our decision. But I would say for anybody who is thinking about relocating, and it's not an easy thing to do. You got to be really serious about it and know why you're doing it, because it's not for the faint-hearted. But if they are really in that mindset, I would certainly suggest that they look into our area. We actually have a man that pretty much works full-time. He's a volunteer, a retired gentleman from California, who devotes his time to helping people. I don't mean financially helping them, but I mean giving them information and supplying them with resources and helping them to learn all they can about the area to make good choices. And he helps people all the time, and he's very busy because of the numbers of people that are visiting here. So it's and Skousen's book that you mentioned is absolutely, in my opinion, the most definitive book in the country on the subject of relocation. If you don't have, or if you haven't read Joel Skousen's a strategic relocation, go to his website, Joel Skousen, Skousen, and order that book. It is worth every penny.
Yes, totally agree with that, and thank you for sharing that. That is one piece of literature that you definitely want in your library, as well as this Romans 13, True Meaning of Submission book. And then just real quick here, we're running out of time so fast, Dr. Baldwin, your most recent book was titled To Keep or Not to Keep, Why Christians Should Not Give Up Their Guns, and that was co-authored with your son Timothy Baldwin as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And just a real quick, brief overview on that book for us?
Sure. Whenever the push by Obama and Senator Feinstein happened back in January, where they tried to ban semi-automatic rifles, ban high-capacity magazines of all types, and create that national background check known as universal background check, was nothing more than universal gun registration. But when that happened, and we recognized the lack of involvement by America's pastors and churches, that's the thing we had in colonial America. And when the Revolutionary War was fought, was we had the Black Robed Regiment, those colonial preachers that were up in the pulpit and that were preaching and teaching and explaining the principles of liberty and encouraging their people to stand and fight. And we don't have that now, and it became very obvious that the pastors and churches of America were not going to take a stand on this serious attack against our Second Amendment. And so because of that, and many people contacting us and saying, our pastor won't say anything, or he says go along with it, and what does the Bible teach, and kind of hand in hand with Romans 13. So we wrote a book specific to the subject of should Christians give up their guns, and if not, why not? So we go into the Bible, both Testaments, and we prove categorically, citing hundreds of scriptural references, and this book is geared primarily to Christians, even though unbelievers would really enjoy it and really learn a lot. It's primarily written to Christians to show them the biblical teaching on the subject of self-defense, how that the principle of self-defense is a God-ordained principle. The Second Amendment is not just a constitutional right. It is a biblical duty. You and I, as providers, have a duty and responsibility to protect those loved ones in our society and neighborhoods and so forth. It is a God-ordained responsibility. And so we go into the Scripture and we show that from both Testaments. So that's why we called it To Keep or Not to Keep, Why Christians Should Not Give Up Their Guns. And boy, that book has just been a tremendous help to so many people. And if they go to my website at chuckbaldwinlive.com, they'll find the place that they can order both of those books on the website.
Wonderful. And please do take some time to check out Dr. Baldwin's website. And you broadcast your sermons live at, is that 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time on your website from Liberty Fellowship?
Yes, actually about 2:30 Sunday afternoon on the internet, live streamed, and that 2:30 is Mountain Time, so adjust it to whatever time you're at. But yeah, we have thousands of people that worship with us every Sunday afternoon. They've tried to find a non-501c3 church or a pastor that will take a stand, and they can't find one, and they're frustrated. So we have them by the thousands that tune into us. Some of them meet in community centers or VFW halls and small groups of people of 10, 20, or 30, and they watch our service every Sunday afternoon at 2:30. And yeah, I invite anybody to do that. They can also go online and watch the archived sermons. They're all archived, and they stay up there, and you can watch them at your convenience. And go to Liberty Fellowship Montana. That's the website for that, libertyfellowshipmontana.com.
Excellent. And those sermons, many of them have blessed us as well. And we so appreciate you, Pastor Baldwin, and what you're doing. We pray for you. We ask for God's continued strength, grace, and favor upon your life and your ministry and what you're doing. We're happy to get connected with people of like mind and spirit. You're like a kindred spirit to me, And we need more people with that mentality of one heart, one mind, and one accord to do what needs to get done in these late hours of history. Again, you've tuned into the Breaking Out of the Matrix broadcast. I'm your host, Caleb Kid Coy, a.k.a. the X-Man, and we had a precious man, Dr. Chuck Baldwin, join us today, and we're thank you for you taking the time to do so, and would invite you to join us anytime in the future that you would like to, sir. Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, Caleb. Great to be with you.
God bless.